Hi, I'm Jerry Colonna, and I'm the author of Reunion Leadership and the Longing to Belong. And the best advice I ever got could also be considered the worst advice. And that is, when I was a young man, my father once said to me, "The higher up the pole the monkey climbs, the more his ass shows." And that was terrible advice, but ended up being really great for me because it compelled me to climb every pole I was confronted with and not being afraid of letting being exposed and having my ass hang out.
Wow. I got that advice early as a leader. I didn't get it from my dad, but I got that early too, Jerry. And that was, yeah, to your point, that sometimes that made me cautious, but this made you bold and willing to
Mhm.
climb. Talk to me about that.
Well, it came to me. I remember I was about 27 years old. I had been working for a couple of years at this magazine publishing company, and I was went to. I was called into a meeting with my boss's boss, and I sat down, and I was being recruited by another division within the company, and he was going to set me straight. So he sits down with me and he starts saying to me, "Listen, you're never going to go anywhere. If you take this job, this is going to be really bad and this is going to happen." And I was just sort of sitting there really quietly. And he said to me, "Why are you sitting there quietly? Wait, you're just sitting there saying to me, you're going to prove me wrong, aren't you?" And I looked at him and I said, "Yeah, I am." And I took the other job. I did really well. I ended up leaving the company. And you want to know the coda on that story?
Yeah.
6 years later, that guy came to me looking for a job. So it was
Wow.
kind of fun.
That's all. Did you give him the job?
No, he wasn't qualified.
Love it. I love that. Of course, right?
He was also, he's a nice guy, but his leadership style was to lead by intimidation. And
Hmm,
I didn't take to bullying.
no. Well, that doesn't work. That
Mm,
doesn't work. That didn't work then. It doesn't work now. It's not going to work tomorrow. Being
mm,
an office bully is a big problem. I mean,
mhm,
you don't want to work in that space. I had someone who that he had "We're all equally worthless" as his boot up sound from
mm.
Full Metal Jacket, and I was like I'm not thinking that's inspiring anything.
Right,
You
right,
know, I'm not thinking that's inspiring anything. That maybe that's great if you're a
right,
Marine, but that doesn't work for
right.
the rest of us.
That's
That
right.
doesn't work for the rest of us. And so, with that, I mean, that guy had no empathy, Jerry. What? Talk to me about that, because clearly he didn't get who you were. Clearly he didn't get what you needed. Clearly he didn't get even organizationally what's needed.
Yeah.
So how did you get that? I mean, that one piece of advice from your dad just sparked that, or what drove that in you?
Oh, no, I would say that that one piece of advice was part of a larger experience of learning and growing. And when I think back to that experience with my boss's boss, I can see now with the lens of being much older, I can see that really what he was experiencing was fear. What he was
Mm,
really experiencing was I was a hotshot young executive, and how was it going to look? How was it going to reflect upon him that I
mm,
was taking a job elsewhere within the company? Right. And, if you think about the whole setup on that, he was more focused on how he looked and how his team looked than even the overall success of the company.
mm,
So not only, I think you're right, did he lack empathy for who I was and what I, needed, but he also was sort of disconnected from a larger experience of what the company needed. What the company needed was young, mid 20-year-old executives who were doing well to rise within the ranks and create more innovation. And so there were a lot of problems with that reaction.
hmm.
Um, And to link it back to my father's statement, my father was a very fearful man. And, he came from that world in which you did not speak up, you did not stand up, you did not stand out because something bad would happen to you. And from an early age, I pushed against that because I very much wanted to leave behind that which the circumstances in which I grew up with. So,
Wow. Wow. So your dad had strong tall poppy syndrome there, or
yes,
the, right?
yes.
That's interesting. So you wanted to leave behind that which you grew up with, and
Mm,
yet your book is about kind of getting back to that, right? About getting
yeah,
back
it's a
to
good point.
where we were. So talk to me about that. I mean, what made you want to run? Because Jerry, full disclosure, man, I left at 18. I
Mm,
went in the Navy. I got the heck away, and it's still hard to go back.
yeah, yeah.
So what about you,
So
man?
I left at 17. And I'm going to put myself in your shoes for a moment and connect and see your story through the lens of my own story. And and perhaps we'll have that connection, that empathetic bridge. When when you said I had to get away, and you chose the route that you did because it was the way to save your life, existentially, if not physically. You know, as a young man, when I first started going into therapy, I used to describe myself as the boy who got away. And you're right. In this new book, one of the things that I offer as a prescription against the division and divisiveness and separateness that so mark our society, one of the things that I prescribe is that those of us who have power, in particular, that we actually reunite, hence reunion, reunite with the parts of ourselves from which we escaped.
Hmm.
Now, your question implicitly is a really important question because I honor the fact that you left to go to the Navy at 18. I honor that fact because it tells me again that you did what you needed to do to save yourself. And yet, correct me if I'm wrong, Phil, there might be a little empty spot right in the middle of your heart. Yeah, right there.
Sure. Sure.
And I would argue that those of us who endeavor to lead others, there is an opportunity in recognizing the little holes in the hearts of those whom we seek to lead. And that by recognizing that and reuniting with the parts of ourselves, we can create the conditions for them to feel like they belong.
Hmm. Wow. So self-recognizing first
Hmm.
that there is a hole, that there is a gap, that there's
Mm.
something missing.
Hmm.
And as you did there,
Mm.
seeing that and acknowledging that you have one as well helps others heal, helps
Well,
others.
that's right. So just take what you just said, recognizing that there's a part of your experience. And let's be honest, we don't often talk about this when we talk about leadership,
That's right. Yeah.
right? So recognizing that there's a part of your experience that, boy, howdy, is universal. right? Just that fact, and that fact alone, can become the basis for what I refer to as an empathetic bridge to all those other people out there. They're either racialized differently, or they identify differently, or whatever it is that puts them outside of your tribe. And wait a minute. This being human has this root commonality. This, what I refer to as the longing to belong. That's what that heart is. That's what that hole is. And oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, the acts that we do to save our life exacerbate the gap in our experience. So we become the boy who leaves. We become the girl who doesn't go home. And we may physically return to a physical space, but we stay apart. Or even worse, we disconnect from parts of ourselves that we really rather not acknowledge.
Yeah. Wow. Whew, that's deep, dude. So with that, as I think about that, right? We build that
Mm,
bridge,
mm.
we work on that fear, or work, I guess, through that fear, or work with that fear.
Yes. All of the
So,
above.
right, yeah, yeah, exactly, right, exactly. And with that, our ancestors then,
Hmm.
they likely had that too, right? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I think about my parent,
Yes.
right? I mean, I think about my grandparents. They escaped from, my dad's side, right? They likely escaped from Poland.
Mm,
My dad, um, I he didn't he never escaped. He never left. I mean, he's still Jerry, my dad's 76 years old. He's still in the house he grew up in. And by still, I mean back, right? He's returned a couple of times, but there's got to be a hole. I mean, his dad died in 70. God, when did grandpa die? 78. Well,
mm,
78 is when he got bucked by the bull. So that was pretty much effectively the end of his life, right? In 78, because he got early onset Parkinson's,
mm,
Alzheimer's. And my dad was forced to grow up because of, you know, because grandpa was basically gone. His dad was gone.
mm.
So he didn't leave. I don't know that I have, and
So,
I don't,
so stay with me. Stay with me
yeah,
here, Phil.
yeah.
Tell me about Grandpa. He was born in Poland, you said?
I don't know that he was born in Poland. I don't think he was born in Poland, but first generation American for sure.
Okay, so his parents
World
were
War
born in
II.
Poland.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. World
Okay.
War II.
Why did they
Yep.
leave?
I don't know. I really don't, Jerry. I don't
That's
know.
what you
Yeah.
need to reunite with.
Yeah. Yeah.
What were the conditions that caused people? Because I guarantee you, it wasn't because they were rich and
No.
well-to-do and
No.
having a great time. That's
Of
not
course.
why we leave the places of our origins. Now,
Oh,
just connect with great-grandparents, grandpa's parents. Just stay with me for a moment. Many times, just like with when we're dealing with parts of ourselves that have been dismembered, disowned, many times we cut ourselves off from the stories of those who came before.
mm,
Sometimes because what we left or what they left was so traumatizing, was so painful that to venture across an ocean, to start all over from nothing, to experience racism or systemic othering when they land in the land of opportunity, when we cut ourselves off from that, We cut ourselves off from a source of our own strength. How brave it must have been for them to travel, to leave behind their parents and their grandparents. How brave it must have been for them to land in a new land, to emigrate. Just the process of emigrating, whether you're a refugee or not, whether you come to a country through legal means or illegal means, just that process must take an enormous amount of strength and courage. And what we leave behind is the stories of the pain and suffering. And so there's a hole. Now, having reconnected, even intellectually, with that experience, what's going on the southern border of the United States?
Yeah. A
Okay.
lot of braveness. Yeah.
Right. We've got, look, there is not a single politician who can escape blame for having a crazy, poorly functioning immigration policy. I'm 60 years old, dude. I have been hearing stories of not having good immigration policy for 40 years.
Yeah.
Okay? This is not a recent phenomena. But look at the people who are trying to cross the Rio Grande. And how are they're not so different from your great grandparents and your grandparents. They're not so different. Not at the emotional level. The means, whether they followed legal means or, back until 1923, it wasn't really clear what the legal and illegal means for emigrating to the United States were. The country was expanding so rapidly, it was just kind of, you talk about open borders. You would arrive, right? And the reason I think that this is important is that those of us who are privileged to lead, whether it's in business or in society, when we embark on that process without a connected sense of to whom we belong, what is our story of belonging? What has the longing to belong been like in our experience, in our lineage, among our kinfolk? Then any effort we might make to create healthy, safe, loving work and society environments becomes performative.
Mm.
So I know I just said a lot of things, but do you see the thread that connects here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Right. So with that, I, I know sometimes the challenge people that I've heard is, well, I pulled myself up from my bootstraps.
Yeah.
I did the work.
Yeah.
And yet from what you're saying, I didn't do the work. Like I'm still avoiding the work. So how do we do that, man? How do we lean in and do that work?
Well, let's acknowledge a couple of things. Yes, that I pulled myself up by the bootstraps. Oh, my ancestors did it. Why can't they? There's a myth there. And the myth, like good myths will always do, there's a kernel of truth, but there's a refutation of the full, complete facts, right? And so, in my experience, for example, and in the book, I explore my Italian and my Irish ancestors. And I start to explore what was it like for them to come here. And I have to confront the fact that they weren't as welcomed
Yeah.
as we pretended. Because part of the trauma response that my ancestors experienced is don't go there, don't talk about it. Not only should you not learn the native language, not only should you anglicize your ethnic names, but you really shouldn't talk about the experience. You should just be grateful for landing on these shores. Now, being grateful and being proud of pulling yourself up, I'm not suggesting that you should not enjoy those feelings. Those are really important feelings, and they're true, but they're not the full story. And the part of the full story is we land in communities. There was a teacher who made a difference in your life, wasn't there?
Of course. Sure.
Right? There was an employer who gave someone a job who might not have otherwise gotten a job because that employer recognized who that person was. And so it is true that our ancestors were resilient. It is true that we pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. But it is also true that we live and work and grow in community. And we are not these isolated silos of rugged individualists who don't benefit from those who have come before us or those who have seen us. And all I'm seeking is that we recognize the totality of that experience so that empathetically we can contribute to that experience for others.
Wow. Wow. Well, that's a lot different leadership than you had back then that I've had in my
Right.
career. So
Right.
how do we even begin making that shift, Jerry? How do we get started there? I get the whole I recognize, I see there's a hole. I built that empathetic bridge. I understand that, right? I get that. And I don't want to be performative here. I want to actually do some of this work. What do I need to do, and how do I encourage others to do this without discouraging them from from their truth?
Okay, so there are two steps. There are two things to point out. What I have come to understand is that the best way to, quote, encourage others is to lead. And what do I mean by that? Do the work yourself. Go first. Go first. Now, what does that mean? I'll ask you a basic question. This thing that I'm suggesting as a means of overcoming division and divisiveness, that, dare we say it, results in people being killed.
Yeah.
Okay? These are the stakes. There's an implicit understanding in your question, which, like me, Phil, you want to do something about this, don't you?
Of course.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Stay right there. First question. Why is it important for you to do something about this? For you. Forget about performative, forget about anybody else. Why is it important for you?
Well, as a way of saying thanks to those that did come before me, those
Amen.
teachers, right? All,
Yes.
my grandparents, my parents, the sacrifices they made,
Right.
all of that.
Think of the softness that just entered your body as you thought about that.
Yeah.
Think about the authentic nature of that vulnerable state. Stay close to that impulse. Now, watch something. Children are trying to cross the Rio Grande and they're leaving parts of their body on razor wire. Okay? Yes. Am I being dramatic? Yes. Okay? So now put those two feelings together. Now lead.
Mm.
Yeah. Do you feel it?
Yeah.
This is a call to action. This is a call to do my work. I have to know to whom I belong. Whose am I? As a first step, that means doing radical self-inquiry, which is that phrase I coined to describe the internal work, doing that to understand what's motivating me. How did I get to where I am? What matters to me? Understanding all of those things so that I can then lead, not by telling people what to do, but by showing them how to do it. Because that's the best way to lead. We know that to be true. The leader who purports to tell people what to do, live by these aspirational values, make these choices. The leader who does those things without also doing them themselves engenders mistrust. Whereas the leader who says, I don't like the way the world is, and I'm going to do my work to make the world better. And I will do what I can to support you in doing your work. That's how I think we change things.
Wow. That's deep, man. We got to do our own work first and then be available to support those who need it, right? Because getting back to your first point, right? The higher up the pole we climb, right? The more of our ass people see. Yeah, exactly. For sure, right? And that is both scary as hell as well as empowering as hell.
It's only scary because it's impactful. Because the more powerful a move it is, of course it's frightening. But how do you want to end your days? Right? I don't want to end my days with my descendants saying, yeah, he's a good man. I want them saying, he tried. He did his best. He didn't go down without a fight. So that they can pick up the mantle of the work and continue the work. There's a biblical invocation, to whom much is given, much is expected.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that we're expected to do other than leave the world better than we found it? My artistic medium is business leadership. So I have to use my medium to leave the world better than I found it. That's my job. I know that. I'm not going to shirk my responsibilities. And I could be wrong, and I could make mistakes, and I could be criticized, and I could be told how I'm wrong. I'll survive. I'll climb that freaking pole. So what?
Yeah. So what?
You hear how that bad advice turned out to be really good advice?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good encouragement for all of us, Jerry, right? Mm-hmm. Let's see more of your ass. Let's see that's right. Let's see it. Let's see it, right? Let's just
what have you got to be afraid of?
Yeah.
Right.
If you fall, you can get back up.
Amen.
That's encouraging, not discouraging. That's awesome. So, Jerry, your book is Reunion, which is fantastic. It's a great book. Thank you for sending along an early copy. It is wonderful and beautiful, and it is not the work, but it starts the work, and it gives us an opportunity to understand the work.
That's right. That's right.
I appreciate that, Jerry, so much. Thank you for spending time with us. Thank you for sharing your ass with me and letting me share mine with you. I appreciate you, man.
I love being with you, Phil. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, same. Thank you, Jerry.